Well, go in. At his father's urging, Itachi placed a hand on the closed sliding doors. On the other side of the spotless paper, the room was silent. And yet the intense aura there, in that room separated from him by a single sliding door, came through with such intensity that it practically prickled his skin. An aura of unrest. Itachi's heart sank. Itachi. His father pressed him. With no other choice, he opened the sliding door. The hall, 15 or so tatami mats large, was filled to capacity, but because there was no light in the room, the figures were all silhouetted. Sorry to make you wait. Gesturing Itachi into the room, his father crossed the threshold and then reached back to close the door. The darkness grew even more concentrated, with no one shadow leading. Several of the human forms stood up and together lit the candles in the four corners of the room. A faint light illuminated the interior. Sit down there and listen. His father pointed to a seat at the very back of the room, the only open space on the floor jammed with people. Itachi pushed through them to make his way to the designated position and sat down quietly. His father watched his son get settled in, before stepping through the assembled group to sit at the front of the room, facing everyone. We'll now begin our regular meeting, Yashiro announced from beside his father. Lord Fugaku's son Itachi will also be attending the meetings from now on. My son is 7, Fugaku said. Although he has the genin status required to take part in these meetings, he is still very much a novice. Due to my admittedly selfish desire to have him learn about the clan's status from a young age, he has been allowed to take part. I appreciate your understanding. He bowed his head. In response, the clan members sitting before him bowed their heads simultaneously. Now then, to pick up where we left off last time, I'd like to discuss the issue of the submission of a written opinion to the Hokage, with regard to the segregation of the clan's compound. Yashiro had barely finished speaking before the people at the meeting all started talking at once. Some insisted on a show of force for Konoha. Others said they should keep a calm eye on things and proceed amicably. And still others looked at the faces of those around them, unsure which opinion to agree with. Even though their purposes were all different, it seemed that everyone there wanted to actively participate in the conversation. Abruptly, Itachi felt someone's eyes on him and immediately turned his own eyes in that direction. Shisui. He met Shisui's eyes. The older boy was silent and seemed unaccustomed to the boisterous atmosphere of the place. Then his good friend smiled at him, and Itachi felt an indescribable sadness. The clan's evil feelings hung heavy here. Itachi was also not accustomed to it. I feel the same as you. Itachi put his heart into the smile he flashed back at Shisui. It was coming up on a year since he had graduated from the academy. Itachi turned 8. His career as a ninja was going smoothly. He hadn't been sent on any particularly difficult missions. Looking back on his year, the mission first accomplished after becoming a genin, that of taking care of the Iwagakure spy, was maybe the hardest he'd been on. His relationships with his teammates was the same as always. Tenma still wouldn't accept him, and Shinko flared up, annoyed with Tenma's attitude. Yuki watched over them half in a panic. Itachi didn't do anything special, but simply stood there on his own. He thought it was a bit of an unnatural, warped team, but even so, do the same thing over and over for a year, and it becomes the norm. Even if they were still unable to really open up with each other, they somehow managed to execute their missions without fuss, and Itachi was satisfied with that, because he had no intention of hanging around for that long. He would pile on the achievements, rise up to Chunin, then Jonin, before becoming the best ninja in the world and eradicating all war. For that reason, Itachi couldn't stand still. Instead of spending any of his precious time worrying about his teammates or his supervising Jonin, he poured his heart into polishing his own skills. so naturally he had mastered ninjutsu to the extent that missions went almost too smoothly. If he had one bone to pick, it would be the fact that Yuki hadn't recommended him for the Chunin selection exams that year. Ostensibly, this was because Tenma and Shinko still hadn't reached the level where they could take the Chunin exams. Participation in the Chunin exams was based on the 3-person cell. When he learned he wouldn't be able to take the exams, in a move unusual for him, Itachi pressed Yuki about it. Normally, whatever was said to him, Yuki didn't bother to react. But just this once, he pushed back against Itachi forcefully. He insisted that it was simply impossible that year, with a look on his face that said he wasn't the least bit interested in what Itachi had to say. Itachi had no choice but to give up. But even if he wasn't allowed to take the Chunin exams, he could still be promoted directly to Chunin if the village administration and the Jonin recommended it. And looking at Team 2's results, it was immediately obvious just how much Itachi contributed to the team. It was a fact that his judgment surpassed that of even his supervising Jonin, and he had reached the highest levels in everything from ninja arts to fighting techniques, all of which had allowed him to rescue his team from danger any number of times. The administration will definitely say something. This belief firm in his heart, Itachi pushed on with the mission before him each day. The lands have all relaxed now that the war is over, so travel between countries is so much safer now, which is why we can assign this sort of mission to a Genin Center team, Yuki said, eyes on the document in his hand. Itachi held the same document in his own hand. Mission to guard the daimyo of the Land of Fire. The village of Konohagakure was within the territory of the Land of Fire, and the ruler of the Land of Fire was the daimyo. But although the village was located in the Land of Fire, it functioned semi-autonomously, with an independent government structure that had the Hokage at the top. On paper, the daimyo of the Land of Fire was ranked above the Hokage, but currently, the land's military might rested with the ninja of Konoha, so the relationship between the two was more like an alliance of equals rather than master and servant. The Land of Fire's daimyo visited Konohagakure annually. This regular event was extremely important for both sides, one that had been faithfully held, even during the Great War. Team 2 had been assigned to guard the daimyo on his trip. So the 4 of us are going to guard him, Tenma asked, looking at the document. Officially, yes, it will be us. But behind the scenes, there'll be a 4-person Anbu cell keeping an eye on things from the shadows. And before that even, the daimyo has his own 12 guardian ninja, an independent corps, made up of only the most skilled ninjas in the land. So we're just a formality, yeah? Well, basically, yes, Yuki said, nodding. The roads are quite safe since the end of the Great War, so the team with the genin who distinguished themselves the most during the year is selected to guard the daimyo. In other words, this assignment is a great honor. Tenma and Shinko both turned toward Itachi. Feeling their gazes on him, he kept his eyes on the document and stayed quiet. We meet tomorrow morning at 4, at the Aun main gates. Don't be late. Tenma and Shinko both assented aloud. Itachi nodded, still silent. All right then, adjourned. Yuki vanished, almost before he was done speaking. Only the 3 genin remained. Tenma's eyes were on Itachi. Guess you're the village pet. You don't gotta go wording it like that, Shinko said. Tenma spit on the ground. Your attitude is just the worst. The usual unchanging day to day. How many years could he stay here like this? A sigh threatened to spill out of him. But remembering that his teammates were still there with him, he swallowed it before it passed his lips. He stood with the force of the repressed sigh, and turned toward the other 2. All right, see you tomorrow. The words had no sooner passed his lips than he had disappeared. He always acts like he's all that. Tenma's grumbling reached his ears like an echo. I know I say this every year, but Konoha is so far, the old man said, sitting on a stump and staring at the teacup in his hand. A fan-shaped crown sat above his wrinkled face. A regular old man, simply fooling the world by clothing himself in gaudy finery. The daimyo of the Land of Fire. Behind the old man, a luxurious palanquin awaited its master's return. Around him were 2 of the 12 guardian ninja and a dozen or so attendants, and Itachi's team too spread out in a loose circle. A main road led from the capital of the Land of Fire to Konohagakure. They had already covered half the distance, and the village was just up ahead. Flat in and around the city, the road started to climb into the steepness of a mountain road. The new green of the woods hung over the heads of the party. "It might be best if we hurry," Yuki said, ever so timidly. "Otherwise, we won't reach the village before nightfall." Tenman Shinko watched with exasperation at the Jonin, bowing his head to the point of servility. Humble before even the 12 guardian ninja. "I know." The daimyo sighed and lifted his bulk up, the enormous fan-shaped crown on his head rocking. The 12 guardian ninja watching over him each took one of his arms. "Master Minazuki," Itachi said, staring at the road ahead, listening to the exchange between the daimyo and his men. "What?" The instant Yuki let his eyes chase after Itachi's gaze, his previous looseness vanished, and his face grew grim. At the change in their teammates, Tenman Shinko stiffened as well. "The daimyo!" Yuki said to the 12 guardian ninja. The 12 guardian ninja grabbed the old man from either side and lifted him into the palanquin. The 4 members of Team 2 stepped out in front of the daimyo's party and spread out in a diamond formation, with Yuki at the tip. The 4 stared at the man before them. He was approaching with a jaunty step, practically bouncing up off the ground. Nothing particularly suspicious about this. So then, why were all 4 of them uniformly on guard? The reason was the man's face, which was hidden behind a bizarre mask.